Been married to Sarah for 20 years. College sweethearts, the whole 9 yards. Built a good life together. Nice house, great kid. Thought we had it all. Well, guess what? Turns out happily ever after can take a sharp turn at. Never saw that coming. Lame. Booked a surprise flight back early from a business trip. Thought I'd surprise Sarah with takeout and a movie night. Key in the door. Expecting the usual flickering TV. Smell of her jasmine candles. Hit with silence instead. Empty house. Weird. Stomach started churning. Checked the bedrooms. Master door was unlocked. A sliver of light peeked out. Pushed the door open slowly. There it was. Like a scene from a bad soap opera. Sarah, tangled in the sheets, with some random dude. Rage? Yeah, there was rage. But mostly, a cold emptiness. Didn't yell. Didn't scream. Just a strangled noise that escaped my throat. The dude scrambled out of bed, fumbled for his clothes, and bolted. Sarah? Tears, apologies, a babbling mess. Didn't hear a word. Just stood there, the picture of betrayal hanging in the air. That's when the plan started forming. Didn't want a screaming match, throwing things. Needed to be clear-headed, strategic. Feigned acceptance, told her we'd talk in the morning. Spent the night on the couch, the image of them burned into my brain. Morning light brought a strange kind of calm. Pretended everything was normal while secretly gathering evidence. Phone records, receipts, anything to prove what happened. Hired a lawyer, a shark. The kind who takes no prisoners, especially cheating spouses. Sarah noticed the lawyer. Panic set in. She tried talking, pleading. Didn't care. The truth would come out, and she'd pay. The lawyer was good. Found hidden bank accounts, a trail of secret art sales Sarah had been keeping from me. Turns out, while I was grinding away at work, she was playing the starving artist with a secret stash. The divorce was brutal. Exposed the affair in court filings. Sarah became the town pariah. The other guy vanished without a trace. Justice, in a way. Got full custody of our son. He needed stability, away from the wreckage of our marriage. Sold the house, a fresh start for both of us. It wasn't easy. Therapy sessions helped me and my son navigate the emotional fallout. Leaned on old friends for support. Slowly, tentatively, started dating again. Met someone new recently. She's kind, funny, everything. Sarah wasn't at the end. Still a work in progress, but I'm moving on. Learned a harsh lesson, but one that made me stronger. There's life after betrayal, and sometimes, revenge is best served cold, calculated, and with a killer lawyer by your side. Life with a newborn wasn't easy, but it was good. Sleepless nights, mountains of laundry, the usual. Sarah seemed happy, the baby healthy. Then things started changing, slowly at first. Remember that whole, focusing on her art career, thing? Seemed forgotten. No more late nights in the studio, paints collecting dust. Work became my world. Climbing the corporate ladder to support our growing family. Didn't mind. That's what husbands do, right? Then came the weird stuff. Little things at first. Unexplained charges on the credit card. A new perfume I didn't recognize clinging to her clothes. Ignored it. Figured I was just tired. Big mistake. The late nights, working on art, started. Calls taken with hushed voices, out of earshot. Missed dinners. Excuses that never quite fit. I tried talking to her, asking what was wrong. Just brushed me off, said I was overreacting. One night, I came home to an empty house. No Sarah, no baby, just a cold, gnawing feeling in my gut. Called her phone, went straight to voicemail. That's when the suspicion really hit. Where was she? With who? The next morning, Sarah waltzed in like nothing was wrong. Tried to play it cool, but the guilt was etched on her face. Confronted her, demanded the truth. Stuttered excuses, tears, the whole drama queen routine. Didn't buy it. Something bigger was going on. That's when I knew this wasn't just a rough patch. This was betrayal, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Didn't yell, didn't scream. Just a quiet determination settled in my gut. Sarah would regret the day she messed with our family. The game was on. Those late night art meetings were starting to grate on me. Came home one night, expecting the usual takeout containers littering the counter. Sarah hunched over a canvas with paint splattered overalls. Nope. Empty house. Silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. Checked her studio untouched. No paints, no brushes, just a layer of dust. A knees coiled in my gut. Where was she? Called her phone again. Voicemail for the third night in a row. Texted. Where are you? One word reply. Busy. Busy with what? That was the question gnawing at my sanity. The next morning, Sarah breezed in, all smiles and apologies. Claimed she'd been at a committee meeting that ran late. Committee meeting? For her art club that didn't exist anymore? My patience was wearing thin. Committee meeting? Huh? My voice was flat, emotionless. Sarah's smile faltered. Yeah, for the upcoming gallery show.
Liar.
There was no gallery show. I knew it, and she knew I knew it. Didn't press her then, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Started noticing other things. Those little unexplained charges on the credit card? More frequent now, and for things Sarah would never buy, fancy restaurants, jewelry stores. The phone calls. Always on mute. Always hushed whispers when I walked into the room. The lingering scent of a cologne I didn't recognize. These weren't random occurrences. This was a pattern, and the picture it painted wasn't pretty. One evening, Sarah left her phone unattended. Stupid mistake. A notification popped up, a text from an unknown number. My heart hammered in my chest. Curiosity, or maybe a morbid sense of dread, took over. Clicked on the message. It was short, just a few words, but enough to shatter my world. Can't wait to see you tonight. Beautiful. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a late art meeting or a committee dinner. This was something far worse. The truth was staring me in the face, and I knew then my life was about to change forever. The lingering scent of that cologne was driving me crazy. It wasn't just on her clothes anymore. It seemed to cling to her like a second skin. Asked her about it. Said it was a new art supply. She was trying. Yeah, right. Art supplies don't smell like expensive cologne shops. Then came the weekend getaway. Need some inspiration for a new piece, she said, booking a cabin in the woods for herself. Didn't like it, but what could I say? Maybe some time alone would clear her head. The empty house felt strange, a hollow echo of the life we once had. Missed Sarah, missed our son, but mostly missed the feeling of normalcy. The conference dragged on, presentations and meetings blurring together. Just wanted to get back home, get some answers. Booked an earlier flight, a surprise for Sarah. Figured a home-cooked meal and a movie night might mend things. Landed. Grabbed takeout, keys in hand, picturing a cozy evening. Nope. Reality check time. Walked in the door, expecting the usual flickering TV, smell of her jasmine candles. Hit with silence instead. Empty house. Same feeling of dread as before. Where was she? With who? This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. Checked the bedroom, then the bathroom. Nothing. But then, a glimmer of hope. Her phone was on the kitchen counter. Screen lit up. Stupid mistake number 2. Picked it up, heart pounding. The same text message notification from before. Clicked on it, bracing myself. This time, it wasn't just a few words. It was a full-blown conversation, a lovey-dovey exchange that made my stomach churn. Didn't need to read the whole thing. Enough was enough. The pieces of the puzzle finally clicked into place. The late nights, the perfume, the weekend getaway. It was all there, black and white, a digital betrayal staring me in the face. Anger surged through me, hot and potent. But then, a cold logic settled in. Panic wouldn't help. Needed a plan. Needed revenge. Served cold and calculated. Sarah had shattered our life, and I wouldn't let her get away with it. The game was on, and this time, I was playing to win. Didn't even slam the phone down. Just stared at the screen, the sickening confirmation burning into my brain. Betrayal. Raw and unfiltered. My wife, in our bed, with another man. The life I thought we had, shattered in a million pieces. First came the rage. Blind, primal fury that choked the air out of my lungs. Wanted to scream, to tear things apart. But then, something unexpected happened. The rage receded, replaced by a cold, steely calm. Dangerous calm. Sarah walked in then, all smiles and, "How was your trip?" Didn't flinch. Just played along, the evidence burning a hole in my pocket. Needed to keep her off guard, buy time for my plan. Good, I said, voice flat. Early flight, figured I'd surprise you. Her smile faltered for a second, just a flicker of unease I didn't miss. The next few days were a blur. We slept in separate rooms, a tense silence hanging heavy in the air. Sarah kept trying to talk, to explain. Ignored her. Didn't need her lies, not anymore. Focused on gathering proof. Downloaded phone records, checked credit card statements. Hired a lawyer, a shark my friend recommended. The kind who takes no prisoners, especially cheating spouses. Costly, but worth every penny. The lawyer was good. Found hidden bank accounts, a trail of secret art sales Sarah had been keeping from me. Turns out, while I was grinding away at work, supporting our family, she was playing the starving artist with a secret stash. Livid doesn't even begin to describe it. The confrontation was anticlimactic. The lawyer laid out the evidence, cold and hard. Sarah crumbled, tears streaming down her face. Didn't feel a shred of pity, just a deep-seated disgust. The divorce was brutal. Exposed the affair in court filings, let the town know what she'd done. She became the town pariah, the scorned wife. Karma, I guess. The other guy vanished without a trace, probably for the best. Got full custody of our son. He needed stability, away from the wreckage of our marriage. Sold the house, a fresh start for both of us. It wasn't easy, but I survived. Therapy sessions helped me and my son navigate the emotional fallout. Leaned on old friends for support. Slowly, tentatively, started dating again. Met someone new recently. She's kind, funny, everything. Sarah wasn't at the end. Still a work in progress, but I'm moving on. Learned a harsh lesson, but one that made me stronger. There's life after betrayal, and sometimes, revenge is best served cold, calculated, and with a killer lawyer by your side. Don't let anyone mess with you or your family. Fight back. That's what I did. The silence after Sarah's breakdown was deafening. No tears, no apologies, just a whimpered plea for forgiveness. Didn't even look at her. Didn't deserve eye contact. The betrayal was a fresh wound, raw and throbbing. But something else bubbled beneath the hurt, a cold, steely resolve. She might have shattered my trust, but she wouldn't break me. No way. Didn't want a screaming match, throwing things. Needed a clear head, a plan. Feigned acceptance. Mumbled something about needing sleep. Crawled into bed on the couch. The image of them burned into my brain. Sleep wouldn't come. Mind racing, piecing things together. The perfume, the late nights, working on art, the distance I tried to ignore. It all fit now. A sickening puzzle clicking into place. Next morning, woke up with a newfound purpose. This wasn't about yelling or crying. This was about getting out, getting even, and protecting my son. She played me for a fool, but not anymore. First order of business evidence. Started small, discreetly. Downloaded phone records, checked credit card statements. Anything that could prove her infidelity. Built a case, brick by brick. Then came the lawyer. Called a friend, got a recommendation. Someone tough, I said, someone who takes no prisoners. He laughed and gave me a number. Met with the lawyer the next day. Sharp guy, expensive as heck, but his eyes held a steely glint that matched my mood. Laid out the situation, the evidence I'd gathered. He listened, took notes, a small smile playing on his lips. We can make her life a living hell, he said, his voice calm but firm. Exactly what I wanted to hear. Didn't care about revenge for revenge's sake, but she needed to pay. For the betrayal, the lies, the disrespect. The following weeks were a blur. Lawyer meetings, digging up dirt, strategizing. Sarah noticed the change, the steely glint in my eyes. Tried talking, pleading again. Ignored her. This wasn't about her anymore. The day the divorce papers hit her was priceless. Shock, then anger, then a desperate scramble. Too late. The evidence was there, cold and hard. The lawyer had unearthed hidden bank accounts. A secret stash of money Sarah had squirreled away from her. Starving artist. Act. Livid doesn't even begin to describe it. The divorce wasn't pretty, but it was mine. Full custody of my son. The house sold. A clean break. A new beginning. away from the wreckage of our marriage. It wasn't easy, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Stay tuned. There's more to this story. The lawyer called it financial warfare. Didn't care what they called it. Point was, Sarah wouldn't mess with me anymore. Changed all the bank passwords, froze our joint accounts. She could scream all she wanted, but the money train had stopped. We were living under the same roof, but it might as well have been different planets. Slept on the couch, ate microwave dinners. She tried talking, pleading, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. The only words that passed between us were the ones relayed through lawyers. The divorce filing hit her like a ton of bricks. Full custody, the house on the market. The lawyer didn't hold back. Then came the kicker. He exposed the affair in the court documents. Public humiliation, he called it. Savage, but effective. News travels fast in a small town. The whispers started, then the stares, then the full-blown gossip. Sarah couldn't leave the house without someone pointing fingers. The other guy in the picture? Vanished without a trace. Coward. Didn't feel any pleasure in her pain. Not really. But there was a strange sense of satisfaction. She betrayed me, our family, and now everyone knew. Karma, I guess. The divorce itself was a blur. Lawyers argued. Papers were signed. A judge finalized things with a slam of his gavel. Sold the house quickly, a fresh start for both of us. Except, mine would be fresh and clean. Hers, well, let's just say the town wouldn't forget anytime soon. Got full custody of my son, the most important thing in all of this. He was confused, scared at first. Therapy sessions helped, along with a ton of patience and reassurance. Slowly, we started rebuilding our lives, piece by broken piece. There were lonely nights, of course. Empty chair at the dinner table, the silence echoing in the house. But there were good days too, filled with laughter and board games, the simple joys of father and son. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. Met someone new at a local coffee shop. She was kind, funny, everything Sarah wasn't at the end. We started talking, then going out for coffee more often. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for happiness again. It's been a long road, full of twists and turns. But I learned a valuable lesson. Life throws you curveballs, but you gotta keep swinging. Now, with my son by my side and a bright future ahead, I can finally say this. I'm moving on. And Sarah? Well, let's just say she's a chapter in my life that's permanently closed. The lawyer called with an update, a smirk in his voice. Found a little surprise, he said. Turns out, Sarah's starving artist act was a bigger lie than I thought. He'd uncovered a trail of secret art sales, hidden bank accounts, years' worth of hidden income. Blood pressure spiked, but the lawyer just chuckled. This changes everything, he said. He was right. With this new evidence, the divorce settlement took a sharp turn. Significantly sharper assets ended up on my side of the table. Sarah? Well, let's just say she walked away empty-handed, besides the clothes on her back. Didn't feel sorry for her, not one bit. She'd played me for a fool, used me as a financial crutch while squirreling away money for her secret life. Now, she could reap what she sowed. The custody battle was the toughest part. Sarah put on a show, the devoted mother act. But the lawyer saw through it, and so did the judge. My son, bless his confused little heart, just wanted things to go back to normal. Therapist reports, school records, even Sarah's erratic behavior during the hearings, it all painted a clear picture. The judge's decision was music to my ears. Full custody to me, Sarah got visitation rights, but supervised. A bitter victory, but a victory nonetheless. Sold the house, a place filled with too many memories, both good and bad. New beginnings for both of us, I suppose. Except, mine would be with a clean slate and a happy son by my side. Hers? Well, the town wouldn't forget her little escapade anytime soon. Single fatherhood wasn't easy, but it was rewarding. School plays, soccer games, scraped knees, all the little moments that mattered. My son was healing, slowly but surely. The therapist said it would take time, but seeing him smile again, genuinely smile, made it all worth it. Then, life surprised me again. Met someone new at a local coffee shop. She was kind, funny, everything Sarah wasn't at the end. We started talking, then going out for coffee more often. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for happiness again. This whole ordeal changed me. More cautious, yes, but not cynical. I learned a harsh lesson, but one that made me stronger. Life throws curveballs, but you gotta keep swinging. And sometimes, when you least expect it, good things come your way. So, here's to new beginnings, to second chances, and to finally moving on. The road ahead is clear, and for the first time in a long time, I feel optimistic. And to Sarah, thanks for the reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's always. My marriage with Melanie came to an end after just 3 years. I've fallen in love with someone else. Let's break up. Until then, I had been completely oblivious to her affair. Indeed, our conversations had dwindled recently. She often came home late, claiming overtime, and on weekends she found reasons to be away from home. I thought maybe that was just how marriage settles down after 3 years. I never imagined her heart had drifted so far from me. I put up with this countryside for 3 years. You should be grateful. You were all about your job, just job, you know? And never interested in me. She said with a displeased look. Whether I try to discuss, deny, or apologize, her decision to divorce didn't change. Eventually, I signed the divorce papers as she demanded. Within a few days, Melanie packed her belongings and left with her new lover to her parents' home out of state. After she left, I stayed alone in the same house. My life became a cycle of work and home. The days just passed. The town where I was assigned after we got married is a quaint countryside area. Not heavily populated, the relationships with the locals were close-knit. Melanie never seemed to enjoy the rural life, and she didn't make close friends after we moved here. Yet, our divorce spread quickly, and I became known as the man who was dumped by his wife. People, both from the neighborhood and my workplace, looked at me with pity. Some directly asked, "That must have been tough. Are you okay?" Or inquisitively, "Is it true your wife ran off with another man?" Honestly, the divorce hit me hard. I felt a gaping hole in my chest and longed to talk to someone. But in this small town, everything spreads fast. I didn't want that, so I kept to myself. To avoid sinking into despair, I threw myself into work even more than before. It seems my workaholic nature partly caused the loneliness Melanie felt. I had mistakenly thought that being diligent at work would make her happy. Now, all I had was my job. I was engrossed in my work, tuning out even the concerns of those around me. Then, about 6 months later, a new colleague joined our company. Her name was Susan Jackson, transferred from our New York headquarters. According to my boss, she is 36, 3 years my senior. She is with top sales performance at the headquarters and touted as a future department head. She was assigned to our branch for a year to boost its performance. With her understated yet tasteful makeup, she dressed in elegant suits, exuded the aura of sophisticated city woman. From day one, she efficiently reviewed our work, identifying current issues and future objectives. She was all business, with clear, concise instructions. She worked silently and diligently, efficiently completing her tasks one after another without any idle chatter. She was the epitome of a capable woman, which was incredibly cool. Yet, when asking for our help, she'd say, "Excuse me, do you have a moment?" With a humble, gentle smile. Despite her competence, she wasn't unapproachable, and everyone at the branch was charmed by the contrast. Everyone admired and wanted to talk to her. She always finished her work on time, leaving with a cheerful, "Good job, everyone," and swiftly headed home. The female coworkers wondered, "She always leaves so quickly. Maybe she has a boyfriend waiting at home. Is she married?" There was a buzz of curiosity about her, but nobody seemed to get close to her. Seeing her, I envied her ability to live life so smoothly. Since Susan came from the city, no one here knows her past. I'd like to live without people knowing my past, not worrying about others' opinions. I've started to think that, in this town, everything becomes known quickly. I had resigned myself to that fact because it's a small town, but seeing Susan's behavior, I've started to wonder if moving to a city like hers would clear up my worries. Also, I thought about joining the headquarters to improve my skills, inspired by someone as high caliber as her. So, I seriously started discussing a transfer to our New York headquarters with my boss. Then one day, a welcome party for Susan was planned. We all left work on time and headed to a nearby bar. That day, Susan didn't rush home at her usual time but joined us for dinner. As the party started, everyone eagerly bombarded her with questions. What kind of work did she do at the headquarters? When did she become the top salesperson? What's her secret? She answered each question meticulously. After a while, the questions shifted to her personal life. Was she married? Did she have a boyfriend? Just as she was about to answer these more personal questions, her phone rang. Excuse me for a moment. She stepped outside to take the call. The questioning paused and the room fell silent. Then, a drunk coworker, Edward, started pestering me. Is it true your wife cheated on you? Suddenly, all eyes were on me. It's over and done with. I tried to deflect, but the inebriated coworker relentlessly prodded. Did you get any compensation? Did you hire a lawyer? No one else intervened, seemingly curious themselves. I didn't want to remember any of it. Frustration built up in me, and I was about to snap. Then, sorry for stepping out. I'm back now, Susan announced with a smile, sitting down between Edward and me. Then she resumed with a smile. We were in the middle of questions, weren't we? And began talking about her personal life. She revealed she was divorced. She had a daughter at 20, now in high school. She got pregnant while in college, took a break to have her daughter, and divorced at 30 due to her ex-husband's infidelity. She shared all that. My daughter lives with my parents in New York. That call was from her. Ended with sweetly smile. She then lightened the mood with more cheerful topics, and neither my story nor hers came up again. I was relieved and deeply grateful to her. Her strength in openly discussing her situation also struck a chord with me. The next day, I caught up with her as she was leaving work on time. Susan, I really appreciated what you did last night. Thank you. I called out to her. She stopped and turned with her usual graceful smile. I should be thanking you for the wonderful welcome party. She responded with her usual graceful and gentle smile, but sensing my feelings weren't fully conveyed, I anxiously continued speaking. No, I mean, you heard the questions I was getting from Edward, right? Stepping in and diverting the attention from me really helped. I find it really tough to talk in detail about my divorce, I said, scratching my head awkwardly, and she nodded understandingly. I get it. It's hard to put into words when the divorce is still fresh. The pain is normal. As she answered, gently gazing distantly, I asked hesitantly, because of me, everyone ended up learning about your past. Are you okay with that? I was concerned she might have reluctantly taken my place, not wanting to share her own story. I was really worried that she had put herself out there as a substitute for me. Sensing my inner turmoil, she showed an even gentler smile, as if understanding my concerns. Time has healed my wounds. You'll be okay, too. Time resolves these things. She reassured me. She waved. See you tomorrow. Lightly and walked away, leaving me feeling almost dreamy as I watched her go. From then on, we began to chat during breaks at work and sometimes after work. Susan talked to her daughter every day at 6 p.m., explaining why she never stayed late. Sharing her secret made me feel a ticklish sense of camaraderie. She spent her weekends in New York with her daughter. My daughter, Catherine, loves baking. She's always made something for me to try when I visit. It's something I really look forward to, Susan would say with a tender, almost melting smile, and watching her became a daily highlight for me. Eager to talk more with her, I started working more efficiently to leave work on time, just like her. Until 6 p.m., when she would call her daughter, we'd chat outside the office. To ensure our time together, I worked harder and harder. But that wasn't like right after my divorce when I was trying to forget something. Making an effort to create time to talk with Susan, even when tired, felt somehow gratifying and pleasant. It was a bitterly cold Friday in February. By then, our post-work chats had become a daily routine. With the onset of colder weather, we had taken to talking in a cafe after work instead of outside. It was almost 6 p.m. Once the time passed, we would have 2 days off starting tomorrow. We wouldn't see each other for 2 days, as she usually went to New York every weekend. I want to talk more. I want to spend more time with her. Unable to contain my feelings, I blurted out, I wish I could go with you tomorrow. Sorry? She looked surprised, realizing what I'd said. I covered my mouth, but it was too late. Seeing my flustered and red face, She chuckled softly. Sure, you can come. I'd like you to meet my daughter too. Shocked yet elated at her consent, I mentally did a victory dance. The next day, Susan and I boarded the plane together, heading to her hometown in New York. Although I'd been there a few times, its bustling crowd always overwhelmed me, and I was incredibly nervous. Her daughter and parents were at her house. I wondered if it was okay for a guy like me to just show up. I just hoped not to leave a bad impression. Nervously, I entered her house. Her daughter, looking a lot like her, and her kind-looking parents warmly welcomed me. I was ushered into the living room and exchanged greetings with everyone. We've heard how kind you've been to Susan since her transfer. Thank you. Her parents said with their appreciation, flustered. I talked about the town where we worked and her accomplishments at the company. Time flew by, and it was almost time for my flight back. Although Susan was supposed to stay overnight, she kindly took me to the airport with her daughter. As we neared the departure gate, her daughter Catherine silently handed me a paper bag. Oh, thank you. Is this for me? She looked up shyly and whispered. I heard it's almost your birthday, so I made you some chocolates. I'm good at making sweets. Thank you for making my mom happy. Hearing that, Susan turned red to the ears and panicked, who is usually composed. You made this just for me? Yes. I wanted to give chocolates to my mom's favorite person. Catherine replied playfully, dodging Susan's attempt to cover her mouth and sticking out her tongue. Their interaction was heartwarming, and I felt incredibly happy. Thank you. Receiving chocolates from the daughter of someone I like makes me the luckiest man. I replied sincerely, a bit shyly, and Catherine covered her face with her hands, squealing. Wow. Susan and I exchanged smiles, both blushing at her cute reaction. The following Monday of that weekend, I followed Susan after work as usual. Thanks for Saturday. The chocolates were delicious. Turning to my voice, Susan appeared a bit bashful, and she pulled a neatly wrapped small package from her bag. Do you know what day it is today? I nodded enthusiastically, taking the package carefully. Of course I knew. It was my actual birthday, and I'd been restless all day. Thank you. I'm so happy. Can I join you at your parents' place again? She looked at me seriously. Be prepared. It's going to be tough. My parents and Catherine seem to like you. They said to bring you again. I bet they'll want you every week. Her smile betraying her embarrassment, and I felt enveloped in happiness again. Just today, my boss hinted that my request to transfer to New York might soon be granted. My recent hard work had been recognized. Susan's assignment here would end in a few months. If my transfer goes through, it would surely bring us closer. Even if it doesn't, I plan to visit her family every weekend by plane, and if needed, I'm willing to change jobs. When my ex-wife Melanie told me that I wasn't interested in her, I didn't quite understand, but meeting Susan, I believe for the first time I truly learned to love someone. While I don't regret divorcing her, I've reflected a lot. I'm determined to build a happy home with Susan, the precious person I've finally found. No matter how hard it is, the thought of this effort fills me with an invigorating. The sound of the alarm clock cut through the morning silence with its annoying sharp beeping. Cliff opened his eyes, trying to suppress an irritated groan. It seemed like he had just touched the pillow half an hour ago, but the clock already showed 7 a.m. What a mystery. Lately, as a decent young parent, he hadn't been getting enough sleep. Nights were dedicated to his 6-month-old child, Oliver. He and his wife were constantly jumping up at the sound of the calling cry from the crib, reminiscent of a siren's wail. But now the apartment was quiet. The child and his wife were still sleeping. Cliff carefully kissed Kendall on the forehead and then got out of the warm blanket. Unable to rest, he tiptoed to the crib, first thing, and looked inside. The tiny boy was snoring, his fist nestled under his chubby cheek. Cliff couldn't help but smile. The child was long awaited in their family. The man couldn't be happier about becoming a father, and when people told him that the boy was his spitting image, he would dissolve into a satisfied smile. Such things as children's whims, sleepless nights, or dirty diapers seemed like nothing to him. He worked hard, but tried to help his wife with these responsibilities. The man enjoyed playing with his son, bathing him, and pushing the stroller for hours along the streets on weekends, just to make sure his son slept in the fresh air. The workday on Monday didn't go well for Cliff, who worked in the field of water purification. There were problems with the delivery of materials, which meant that work at enterprises had to be suspended. Naturally, clients were dissatisfied, and it was up to Cliff to speak with them. By the end of the day, the man dreamed of returning home and hugging his son as soon as possible. But sad surprises in his life were just beginning. When he was stuck in evening traffic on his way home, his wife called on his smartphone. "Hi, Kendall," answered the husband, trying to hold the phone and make a turn at the same time. "Will you come home soon?" his wife asked, her nervousness evident in her voice. The man frowned. What if something had happened to their son? "The city is jam-packed, but I'll be there in 40 minutes for sure," he promised. Did something happen? No, she hurried to reassure her husband. "Everything is fine. Don't hurry." After that, Kendall hung up. The conversation seemed strange to Cliff. Despite his wife's request not to hurry, he hastened home. To his great surprise, he didn't find his wife at home. Their son was sleeping in the crib, but his mother wasn't there. Deciding that she might have gone down to the neighbor, he went to the kitchen to have dinner. But instead of dinner, a note attached to one of the magnets on the refrigerator was waiting for him. His wife wrote, "Rushing." The text was barely legible, and it took him several attempts to understand its essence. He simply couldn't believe his eyes. "Forgive me, Cliff. I can't stay with you and our son. Circumstances have arisen. Tell our son that I love him." Of course, the man thought it was a prank. He started calling Kendall, and then her acquaintances, but to no avail. She disappeared. Thus began the new life of Cliff and his son, Oliver. Raising a child was difficult, and it was not getting any easier with time. Although numerous blogs that he scoured, searching for answers to his questions, asserted that it was about to get a little easier. When the baby starts to eat, you will be easier. When the baby takes his first steps, you'll be easier. When he goes to school, you'll be easier. Now Cliff could answer all such statements categorically. No, there was nothing easy about parenting. Each year brought its own difficulties. At first, the man had to work with the child in his arms, while delving into issues of infant feeding. The child sometimes got sick, things got confused, and Cliff's head spun. Then he made a daily schedule of tasks, and in a few months, learned to handle the responsibilities skillfully. During this time, Kendall had only sent one message, the divorce papers, but she refused custody. Without feeling any pity, Cliff signed the necessary papers and forgot about the woman forever. When Oliver became a schoolboy, his father had to not only deal with the crisis of adulthood, but also attended parent-teacher meetings. He felt like a black sheep among the army of mums. However, all these difficulties did not prevent the father and son from living a happy life. Cliff raised a kind and responsive boy who could stand up for himself and for the weaker ones. Oliver went to karate and swimming from the age of 4. He was healthy and a real source of pride for Cliff. The fact that Kendall once existed in their lives was forgotten. Even Oliver, having asked a couple of questions about his mother in childhood, also stopped thinking about her. Only Kendall herself reminded them of her existence when Oliver turned 18. Oliver was supposed to celebrate with friends at a country house on the weekend. They had rented it. On Tuesday, on his birthday, he and his father gathered for a family dinner, which they planned to finish with a festive cake. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. The men glanced at each other. "Are you expecting guests?" Cliff smiled. "Well, actually, no. Everyone already congratulated me. Maybe Ruby?" Oliver responded and went to open the door. There was a woman he didn't know on the doorstep. The birthday boy looked at the guest in surprise. "Hello," he said politely. "Oliver, dear," the woman immediately said, and her voice trembled. "Oliver, my boy, how you've grown." She rushed to the astonished Oliver, hugging him tightly. The young man was stunned, stepped back, not understanding what was happening. Cliff saw this scene as he came out of the kitchen. "Kendall?" he squeezed out sharply. "What the hell are you doing here?" After half an hour of tears and lamentations from Kendall, the trio sat down in the kitchen. The birthday cake was untouched in the center of the table. "A year ago, I became a widow," Kendall began. "My husband was fabulously rich, and he left me everything, including his construction company. But it's hard to run the company alone. I need an assistant." "Why do you need us?" asked Cliff, nervously drumming his fingers on the table. "You see, I can't trust anyone, explained Kendall. Everyone in the company dreams of taking my place, and I decided that I can bring in my own son, you know, and then all the inheritance will go to Oliver. I have no children or heirs, only you, Oliver. We could leave here for the capital, where you will have many prospects. The woman looked hopefully at her son, while Oliver looked hesitantly at his father, noticing how the man's face turned red and then covered with white spots. You know what, Kendall? Get out of here and go back where you came from. Cliff growled, barely containing his rage. I raised my boy for 18 years, and now you come and say that it will be better for him with you? You're insane. Do you even know that he has his own life? He just got into university. He has a girlfriend with whom they have serious relationships. Although, how would you know? Seeing his father's condition, Oliver tried to calm him down by putting his hand on his shoulder. Then he shyly looked at his mother. I'm sorry, but Dad is right. I don't even know you. He shook his head. I have other plans for my life, and I won't abandon Dad, just as he didn't abandon me, unlike you. Kendall tried to convince her son, but he was adamant. Eventually, she left with nothing. However, 2 weeks later, when Cliff returned home, he had a strong sense of déjà vu. The apartment was empty, there was dead silence, and there was a note on the fridge. Dad, this is my chance and I can't miss it. I have no warm feelings for my mother, but I feel that I can achieve more in the city. As soon as I'm on my feet, I'll come back and I'll be able to help you. You won't need anything. I'm sorry I'm running away like this, but you wouldn't understand me and wouldn't let me go. Don't look for me, but know that I love you. The man took a step towards the stool to collapse on it, as his legs weakened. He held the note in his trembling hand, feeling the pain spreading in his chest. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Deciding that it was Oliver, who had come to his senses, Cliff rushed to open the door, despite the growing fire in his chest. But on the threshold was Ruby, Oliver's girlfriend. Hello? The blonde smiled briefly. Is Oliver home? His phone isn't answering. The man found no strength to explain anything. He silently handed the crushed note to the girl, and then a particularly sharp pain pierced his heart, and groaning, Cliff grabbed his chest. Oh my God, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Ruby rushed to the man who collapsed on the floor, but he could no longer answer. The girl immediately called an ambulance, but they couldn't save the man. It seemed that his heart simply couldn't withstand the second betrayal. Ruby buried him very modestly. Unable to find any other solution, she took some money from the deceased's apartment to pay for the burial, because she had no savings of her own. She hoped that Oliver would come to his father's funeral, but he never showed up. 7 years passed since Oliver's escape and Cliff's funeral. As promised, Oliver not only got back on his feet, but also achieved unprecedented success. He returned to his father as a winner and dreamed of telling him about it. Moreover, he hoped to take his dad with him, show him the capital in a different life. But the apartment greeted him with silence and dust, as if no one had lived there for a very long time. Dumbfounded, Oliver decided to visit his ex-girlfriend, who lived in the next entrance. Ruby opened the door immediately, and Oliver realized that she had not changed at all. Beautiful, with short light hair and naive blue eyes. Hi, he smiled, feeling awkward. Oliver. The girl's eyes widened. But where did you come from? May I come in? He asked, nodding towards the apartment. Ruby nodded, stepping aside and allowing her ex-boyfriend to enter the house. She lived there alone. Her grandmother, who raised the girl, died in a car accident 5 years ago. The girl had not yet gotten married and worked at the local library. However, the girl was reluctant to share the details of her personal life, as if she was not telling me something. Did you come to visit your father's grave? Ruby asked, pouring tea for the man. Well, what? Oliver was baffled. What grave? Ruby looked at him in surprise, but then sadness appeared in her eyes. Don't you know anything, Oliver? I buried your dad 7 years ago. Right after you disappeared, he had a heart attack. That evening, they went to the cemetery, where his son, kneeling at his father's grave, begged for forgiveness. But it was too late. Oliver decided to stay in his hometown for a while. He increasingly visited his ex-girlfriend. Sometimes he would stop by her workplace, saying he was passing by, or invite her for a walk or dinner together. Thus, the odd relationship revived, as if a withered plant were generously watered and the sun warmed it up, allowing it to bloom. The young people began to prepare for the wedding. "We have to visit your father's grave before the wedding," Ruby said when the young people were working on the guest list. So a couple of days later, Ruby and Oliver came to the cemetery to share the happy news with his father. When the young people approached the grave and the girls sat down to lay flowers, a little boy appeared next to them. It was already evening, and Ruby even shuddered when the pale boy, like a ghost, emerged from the mist, asking, "I am sorry, do you have any spare change? I'm hungry." The boy was a typical representative of the local beggars, thin, dirty, and sometimes wearing torn clothes. The cemetery was full of such characters, and the guard often chased away those who tried to collect candy or anything else from the graves. Oliver and Ruby exchanged glances, and the man searched his pockets for cash, eventually handing the child a couple of bills. "Aren't you afraid to wander here, boy?" asked Ruby, looking at the child with pain in her heart. He seemed to be around 6 years old. "I'm scared," the child honestly admitted, scratching his head and hiding the money in his pocket. "I wouldn't have come here, but getting a berating from my grandma is even scarier. Maybe the dead won't come out of the graves, but grandma will definitely beat me if I don't bring money, and the people in the cemetery are kind, unlike in town. They're sad here, that's why they give money, but in the city they chase me, they even hit me sometimes." "So, you're beaten at home? Does your grandmother make you beg?" Ruby asked, feeling increasingly worried. "Yes," the boy nodded, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Where does your grandmother live?" "Oh, they're in the village." The boy waved his hand. Ruby gasped. It was a half-hour drive to the village, and the boy had to walk even longer. It was getting darker and cooler outside. "Oliver, let's at least give him a ride home," Ruby asked her fiancé. He nodded, agreeing with her. They got the boy, who introduced himself as Louis, in the car and drove him home. Oliver lived in an old wooden house, and as soon as they parked next to the gate, an angry old woman came out of it. Despite her advanced age, she moved quickly and strongly. The old woman immediately started shouting at the little boy, scolding him for something, and not hesitating to use foul language. Then she even slapped him hard. "What are you doing, woman?" Oliver barked, approaching her. Meanwhile, Ruby ran up to the child, who just flinched and didn't even cry, because he was used to such treatment. "What's your business here? Why are you interfering where you're not wanted?" The old woman screeched. "Who are you, anyway?" She looked at Oliver and Ruby, and then suddenly fell silent. Her eyes narrowed and she asked, "And you, girl, are you Lisa Hamilton's granddaughter?" "Answer." "Yes," Ruby nodded fearfully, "but my grandmother died 5 years ago." "Oh, you wretch. Take your freak away. Look at you. You and your grandmother sent that brat to me, and now you've come to teach me upbringing. You should have taken care of yourself, cuckoo. You gave birth, but you refused to raise a child, right?" Ruby listened in complete shock as the old woman's curses poured out of her mouth. "Wait a minute," Oliver interrupted. "We don't understand you. Can you explain what's going on?" And she did. It turned out that when he ran away with his mother, Ruby found out she was pregnant, but she didn't get a chance to tell him since he disappeared. On the day she came to share the news, Oliver's father died. The girl buried him, but didn't know what to do next. Her grandmother urged her to terminate it, but Ruby couldn't get rid of her unborn child. She gave birth to a boy on time, but the baby turned out to be dead. At least that's what the doctors told Ruby. In reality, her grandmother paid someone to keep quiet and deceived her. Lisa Hamilton believed that they would not be able to raise the child and that her granddaughter would ruin her life. She sent her granddaughter to study in another city, and the child lived with a cleaning worker. Meanwhile, the elderly woman wanted to send him to an orphanage eventually, but she didn't have time to settle things before she got hit by a car and died. Meanwhile, the cleaner took pity on the child and decided to keep him, but with time she realized it had been a mistake. She was laid off from work, but had to feed and clothe the child. It was difficult to raise him. There was not enough money and her health was failing. She became increasingly angry with the boy each day, considering him a burden. But she couldn't give him away, fearing that she would be prosecuted for that. It would have been difficult to believe her story if Oliver and Ruby did not take a new look at the boy. He turned out to be insanely similar to his parents. That evening, they took Louis to their home. He was suspicious of adults, but he was happy to leave the old woman he used to consider as his grandmother. Ruby hoped that over time the boy would thaw and she could compensate him with love for all the years that they had been apart. Tears streamed down Ruby's face, and her heart ached with pity for this child. Perhaps your father brought him to us, Ruby mused, when the boy dressed in his new pajamas slept in their bed. Oliver remained silent, though he himself thought the same thing. Maybe his father could forgive him after all, and give him the best wedding present ever. 5 years have passed since then. The family's apartment was noisy as usual. Louis teased his 4-year-old sister and threw a pillow at her older brother's laughter. "Children, are you ready yet?" Oliver asked, peeking into his son's room and shaking his head. "Molly, don't strangle your brother. He still has a test to take today." "Dad, why did you have to remind me?" groaned his son from under the pillow. "Molly, squeeze harder." "I don't want to go to school." "But I want to go to school," the girl declared. "You're thinking that way now, little piglet." The schoolboy snorted, emerging into the light of day. Oliver didn't notice his wife approaching as he watched the children. She hugged him around the waist, pressing close to her beloved. He smiled, kissing her on the head. "Breakfast is on the table," Ruby said, looking lovingly at the mischievous children. Molly laughed again because Louis started tickling her. The laughter of children, the smell of coffee from the kitchen, the tender smile of his wife. Oliver thought this morning was the most beautiful of his life. But he was wrong. There were many. Trust. That's one thing I thought we had rock solid in our marriage. But hey, life loves a good curveball, doesn't it? It was just another Thursday. Or so I thought, rummaging through drawers for my charger. Then I found her phone, buzzing with notifications, not usually a big deal, right? Except this time, it was. I wish I could say I didn't snoop, but those messages, they were like a car crash you can't look away from. Text from AP, my assistant, no less. Stuff that would make a sailor blush. My gut twisted into knots. This wasn't just some flirty office banter. It was full-blown betrayal. So, I confronted her. Laid it all out. Her face went ghost white, then red hot. Denial. Accusations. The whole 9 yards. I was paranoid, delusional. But the evidence was glaring. Right there in pixels and bytes. She kept denying, though, like if she said it enough, it might come true. I wasn't going to let this slide. I needed the truth, concrete and undeniable. Enter my pie. A guy who looked like he stepped out of a noir film. He got to work, tailing, taking snaps, the whole shebang. Meanwhile, I turned our home into my personal surveillance state. Cameras hidden in the most unassuming places. It felt wrong. But what choice did I have? Days passed. A weird mix of normalcy and espionage. Then, the pie hit the jackpot. Videos. Man, not just texts, but actual, irrefutable proof of her and AP together. Watching it felt like a punch to the gut, each frame a betrayal. That night, I sat in our living room. The evidence laid out on the coffee table like some twisted exhibit. The truth was right there, undeniable. My next move was clear, but man, was it going to be a doozy. Never thought I'd be the guy serving cold, hard truth with the appetizers. But here I was, at our meticulously planned dinner party, where I'd unveil my wife's betrayal. Our closest friends and family, all gathered around, clueless about the storm brewing. I clinked my glass, signaling for silence. "I've got a surprise," I announced, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. The screen lit up, showing texts, emails, and, the grand finale, video evidence of my wife's affair with my assistant. Gasps echoed around the room. I watched their faces, a mix of shock and disbelief. My wife's face was a canvas of horror and denial. "This is a misunderstanding," she stammered. But her words fell flat in the heavy air of betrayal. I didn't bask in the drama. Instead, I moved to the next act of my plan. Filing for divorce seemed like a natural step, but it was more strategic than emotional. I cited her affair as the reason, knowing it would influence the proceedings in my favor. My lawyer was a shark, and I was ready to let him loose. But the real blow was the asset freeze. I had our accounts and assets legally frozen, leaving her financially stranded. The look on her face when she realized the extent of her predicament was something I thought would bring me satisfaction. Instead, it was a hollow victory. In a desperate attempt, she pleaded for forgiveness, promising it was a mistake. "I never meant for this to happen," she cried, tears streaming down her face. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done being the understanding husband. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. As the chapter closes, I'm left with a mix of emotions. There's a sense of justice, sure, but also a profound sense of loss. I had loved her, after all, but that love was buried under layers of betrayal and deceit. The path ahead was clear, but it was a path I'd walk alone. You know, they say life's a roller coaster, but mine? It's more like a thriller movie, the kind that leaves you on the edge of your seat, heart pounding. It all started when a P, my right-hand man at work, vanished into thin air. Just like that, poof, gone. This was the guy who'd been warming my seat at home while I was out busting my chops. I should have been relieved, but his disappearance only thickened the plot. That's when the gears in my head started turning. If life wanted to play games, I was game. It was time for a little payback. A carefully orchestrated plan to teach my dear wife a lesson she wouldn't forget. The first move? A social media crusade. Nothing too dramatic, just a few well-placed posts to give people a glimpse of her true colors. The reactions were instant. A mix of shock, outrage, and for some, a bit of, "I knew it." The fallout was like a line of dominoes. First, her job. She called me, tears and all, saying she got the boot. Scandal, they called it. I almost felt a pang of something. But no, this was the bed she made. Then came the cold shoulder from friends, family, the whole entourage. She was like a pariah, and I was the puppet master, pulling the strings from behind the curtain. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy it, watching her world crumble piece by piece. But there was this nagging voice in the back of my head, wondering if I'd gone too far. I shook it off. This was justice, right? Payback for all the lies, the deceit. I was the victim here, taking back control. As her world shrank, mine expanded. I was in the driver's seat, steering this narrative where I wanted it to go. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was a show, a spectacle, and I was both the director and the lead actor. A part of me wondered, when the final curtain fell, what would be left of the stage we'd both played on. If someone had told me my life would turn into a twisted game of chess, I'd have laughed. But here I was, in the thick of it. It started with my wife, desperate and penniless, her accounts frozen solid by my doing. She was scrambling for pennies, a far cry from the life of luxury she was accustomed to. Watching her struggle stirred something in me, but my resolve was firm. This was her doing, her consequences to bear. Then came the eviction notice. I owned the house, and she had no legal claim to it. The notice was just a piece of paper, but it might as well have been a dagger. It felt like the final nail in the coffin of our shared life. She pleaded, cried, but I was deft at it. This was retribution, plain and simple. That life, oh, it loves its curveballs. Just when I thought I had the upper hand, a mysterious package landed on my doorstep. Inside, evidence that turned my world upside down. AP, the man I thought was just a cheating scoundrel, was actually a pawn in a larger game. He was targeting me, not just personally, but professionally, a hired gun by a rival business. It was like watching a thriller unfold, except I was the protagonist. My wife, as it turned out, was just a means to an end, a tool in their elaborate scheme to take me down. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She was used, manipulated, just as I had been. This revelation threw me into a tailspin. The anger and thirst for revenge I'd been nursing was now mixed with a strange cocktail of guilt and confusion. Had I been too harsh? Was this really justice, or just another layer of the game? As my wife fought tooth and nail against the eviction and the asset freeze, I found myself in a moral quagmire. Part of me wanted to let her drown in the mess she'd helped create, but another part, a part I tried to silence, wondered if I was any better than those who'd set this chain of events in motion. Her legal battles were futile, her resources a mere fraction of what she once had access to. It was a losing fight, and we both knew it. But as I watched her struggle, a new battle raged within me. A battle between the man I'd become in this saga of revenge and the man I once was, before betrayal, before vengeance, before this all-consuming game had begun. This chapter of my life, it wasn't just about settling scores anymore. It was about unearthing truths, about understanding the real enemy, and perhaps about confronting the demons within. Ever had one of those moments where everything feels like it's spinning out of control? That's where I found myself, right in the middle of my grand plan for revenge. It started off as a simple idea, a public event, the kind that would put my wife's dirty laundry out for everyone to see. I set the stage perfectly, ensuring every eye in the community would be on us. The night kicked off without a hitch. There she was, my soon-to-be ex-wife, clueless about what was about to hit her. The room was buzzing, and then I dropped the bomb. The evidence of her affair splashed across a giant screen. The gasps, the whispers, it was like music to my ears. But then, things took a turn. A couple of her die-hard friends, or what she had left of them, jumped to her defense. Words were thrown, tempers flared, and before I knew it, a full-blown physical altercation erupted. It was chaos, a whirlwind of shouting and shoving, and there I was, in the eye of the storm, feeling a rush I couldn't explain. But then, the unexpected happened. In the midst of all this madness, my wife collapsed. Stress, isolation, the whole scandal, it was too much for her. You'd think that would have been a wake-up call for me, right? A moment to step back and rethink this vendetta. But no, I was too far gone. My heart had turned to stone. I watched as she was rushed to the hospital, and I felt nothing. Just when I thought things couldn't get more twisted, enter the mysterious benefactor. Out of nowhere, someone started throwing support her way, pulling her out of the financial abyss I tossed her into. It was infuriating. Who was this person undermining my carefully laid plans? This chapter of our lives was like a game of chess, with moves and countermoves, but I was starting to lose track of who was playing who. There I was, thinking I was the puppet master, but with every twist and turn, I was left wondering who really had the control. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, boom, you're hit with a revelation that turns everything on its head. That's exactly what happened to me. I was deep in my quest for revenge when I decided to dig a little deeper into AP, the man who turned my life into a living soap opera. I started digging into AP's past, and let me tell you, it was like peeling back layers of an onion. Each layer revealed something more rotten than the last. Turns out, this guy was a pro at playing people, a real-life puppet master. He'd been manipulating relationships for personal gain his whole career. Knowing this added a whole new flavor to the betrayal. It wasn't just a fling, it was a calculated move. Meanwhile, my wife, in a desperate attempt to salvage whatever dignity she had left, made a public apology. It was broadcasted for all to see, a display of remorse, or so it seemed. Part of me wondered if there was any sincerity in her words, if she truly regretted the pain she caused. But by then, my heart had hardened. I couldn't see past my own hurt and anger. So, I did what any self-respecting, scorned husband would do. I rejected her apology, and not just privately. I made sure everyone knew that her words meant nothing to me. This rejection, it was like the final nail in the coffin for her. I watched, almost detached, as she spiraled further down. Her life, once so full of charm and grace, was now in ruins. The vibrant woman I once knew was no more. In her place stood a broken shadow, a reminder of the damage caused by betrayal and revenge. It's strange, being in this position. Part of me relished in her downfall, felt a sense of justice being served. But another part, a quieter, more reflective part, wondered if this was really victory. Watching her descent, I couldn't help but question what I'd become in this quest for retribution. Was I really the hero of this story? Or had I turned into something else, something darker? Who would have thought, right? After all the chaos, the lies, the heartache, the man who started it all, my assistant, AP, just waltzes back into the picture. He shows up out of the blue, oozing charm and deceit, offering my wife a deal straight out of a spy movie. The nerve of this guy, he wanted her to betray me, to hand over sensitive company information in exchange for a fat stack of cash. As I watched from a distance, I could see the conflict in her eyes. She was cornered, desperate, her life a tattered mess because of the games we'd all been playing. I could tell part of her was considering it, weighing the option of one last betrayal for a chance to escape this nightmare. But then, something unexpected happened. She said no. After everything, after the lies, the affair, the public humiliation, she drew a line. She refused to sink further, to betray me again. It was a moment of clarity, a flicker of the woman I once knew, the one I thought I'd lost forever to greed and deception. That's when AP showed his true colors. The guy wasn't just a cheat, he was dangerous. He threatened to hurt me, to take me out of the picture if she didn't comply. The stakes were suddenly higher than any of us had anticipated. And then, another twist. My wife, the woman I'd vilified, the one I'd pushed to the brink, came to me with a warning. She told me everything. AP's return, his offer, his threat. It was a surreal moment, standing there, listening to her, realizing that despite the venomous path our lives had taken, there was still a shred of concern, of care. It was a chapter straight out of a thriller, with betrayals, threats, and unexpected alliances. The lines between right and wrong, between revenge and justice, they were all blurred. Here we were, in the middle of a game that had spiraled out of control. A game where the only winning move was not to play. But the question remained, were we too far gone to back out now? Life's funny, you know. One moment you're on top of the world, the next, you're setting a trap for the guy who tried to ruin your life. That's where I found myself after my wife's bombshell warning about AP's comeback and his devious plans. I was burning with a mix of anger and a strange sense of gratitude. There she was, trying to save me from the mess she helped create. Irony at its finest. Huh? So, I hatched a plan, a real cunning one. I used the info she gave me, turned the tables on AP. It was like setting up a chessboard, every piece moving exactly as I wanted. And man, did it work. AP walked right into the trap, thinking he was the hunter when he was actually the prey. The look on his face when the cops slapped those cuffs on him was priceless. All his schemes, his manipulations, they crumbled to dust right there. But here's the kicker, even with AP out of the picture, things between me and my wife were too far gone. There was no fairy tale ending, no tearful reconciliation. The betrayal, the lies, they were too deep, the wounds too raw. We were past the point of no return, and it didn't end there for her. With AP's arrest, all sorts of skeletons came tumbling out of the closet. She got tangled up in the legal mess, facing charges for her part in the whole debacle. It was a hard fall from grace, and I didn't lift a finger to break her fall. Then came the divorce settlement. Let's just say the prenup was a lifesaver. I walked away with everything, leaving her with nothing but memories and regrets. I know it sounds harsh, but hey, actions have consequences, right? The final blow? She ended up homeless. Yeah, you heard that right. From living in luxury to having nowhere to call home. Her life, once so full of promise and laughter, now a shadow of its former self. As I close this chapter, I can't help but wonder, was it worth it? The revenge, the satisfaction of seeing her life crumble, did it really make up for the betrayal? I guess some questions don't have easy answers. All I know is, life goes on, and so do I, in a world that's a little less bright, a little less kind. Life's a funny thing, you know? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball that knocks you off your feet. That's where I found myself, in the aftermath of it all. Rebuilding my life, focusing on my business, trying to find some semblance of normalcy in the chaos that had become my existence. The community, well, they were split right down the middle. Some looked at me as a hero, a man who stood up for himself. Others, they pitted her, the woman who lost everything. You could feel the tension, the whispers, the judgments. It was like living in a fishbowl, every move scrutinized, every decision judged. Then came my wife's regret. It was like a floodgate had opened, apologies and pleas for forgiveness pouring out. But it was too late. The bridge was burned, the damage done. I couldn't find it in me to forgive, to forget. I was moving on, or at least trying to. But life, oh, it had other plans. Enter the plot twist. A long-lost friend of mine reappears out of the blue. And guess what? He was the mysterious benefactor helping my wife all this time. Talk about a stab in the back. Here I was, thinking I knew my friends, my enemies. But the lines, they were all blurred. He believed in second chances, redemption, all that jazz. But me? I felt betrayed, tricked. It was a rift that couldn't be mended, a friendship lost in the crossfire of my vendetta. And just when I thought I'd seen it all, my wife, beaten down by life, makes one final plea. Not for love, not for reconciliation, but for survival. She was at rock bottom, and even then, I couldn't bring myself to lend a hand. It was a decision that weighed on me, a reminder of the cost of revenge. This chapter of my life was a crossroads, a test of character and loyalty. What do you do when the lines between right and wrong are blurred? How do you choose between self-preservation and compassion? These were the questions that haunted me as I stood at the precipice of a new life, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. If you told me a year ago that my life would turn out like this, I would have laughed you out of the room. But here I am, staring at the ruins of everything I once held dear. It all came crashing down, starting with me slamming the door shut on my wife's final plea. There was no going back, no more chances. I was determined to close this chapter of my life, no matter the cost. My wife, left with nothing, surprised me though. She found this resilience, this will to survive despite being at rock bottom. Watching from afar, I saw her grappling with new challenges, legal battles, health issues, the whole 9 yards. It was like she was clawing her way out of a hole, determined not to let the darkness consume her. But, as I sat in my tower of solitude, the winds began to shift. The community, which once had my back, started to turn. Whispers of my ruthlessness, my cold-hearted revenge, began to spread. Friends became strangers, and strangers became critics. My reputation, once my most prized possession, was now tarnished. Then, the unthinkable happened. My empire, my business, which I had sacrificed so much to protect and grow, began to crumble. It was a slow, painful process, like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. I had been so focused on my vendetta, so consumed by my need for retribution, that I had neglected the very foundation of my success. In the end, it wasn't just my wife who lost everything. I stood amidst the wreckage of my own making, realizing the heavy price of my vengeance. My once flourishing business was now a shadow of its former self, my personal life a barren wasteland of broken relationships and lost connections. As the chapter closed on this tumultuous saga, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of it all. In my quest to punish my wife, to make her pay for her betrayal, I had lost everything. My story, which began as a quest for justice, ended as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of revenge. There was no peace, no satisfaction, just the hollow emptiness of a man who had let his thirst for